Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Makbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at two very important stories. The first is with reference to the economic situation in the country, which of course has been under much discussion and unfortunately turbulence since the start of this year. And in another development, we have seen that ending 5 years of self-exile, we now will be taking a look at a new finance minister in the shape of ISHAQ, and he will be taking oath very soon as the new finance minister of Pakistan after the resignation of the former finance minister, Mr. Miftah Ismail. This is, of course, an important development, especially in the wake of the Prime Minister's visit to the UN General Assembly session, where we also saw very important bilateral meetings on the sidelines, and then also a very important meeting with the MD of the IMF, in which we saw a number of key relaxations being given, because this, of course, has been one narrative of Pakistan with regards to climate change issues and the loss and damage that has occurred, which needs to be countered and factored in the kind of debt relief that we are looking at. And so we have seen a number of relaxations, which include increasing the amount of the upcoming tranche, 3-month freeze on the existing taxation on petroleum and fuel cost adjustments in an electricity tariff, and also a relaxation in the current and fiscal deficit targets. This is, of course, an important point at which we will be welcoming in the new finance minister and seeing how this change is going to bring about an economic turn that is, of course, much needed in the country. We will also be taking a serious look at the kind of challenges that exist. Of course, there were numerous economic challenges that the government itself inherited earlier this year, and now that the new finance minister would also be inheriting. And so we'll try and understand what sort of policy initiatives or actions will be taken by Mr. ISHAQ as the new finance minister, and whether or not he will be applying some of the policies or actions that he has taken in the past before, especially with regards to the exchange rate, which currently is the sole responsibility of the State Bank of Pakistan and outside the purview of the finance minister. So that is going to be our first segment of the show today, and we'll be taking a look at the political and economic consequences that this change will have for the country and the kind of challenges that exist for this particular portfolio. At the end, we'll also be taking a look at another very important aspect, which is with regards to Darknet, an important and shady part of the internet in which a lot of activities occur, including money laundering, cybersecurity issues, various data sharing, even terrorist networks operate there, child pornography issues have surfaced. So there's a lot of this going on the Darknet that doesn't really come into light, and we're going to be taking a look at how our cybersecurity issues need to be looked at and resolved, and perhaps are not in line with the way that these factors are emerging and evolving, and how the internet seems to be progressing moving forward, especially the Darknet. We'll also be taking a look at the report which has circulated in terms of what cybersecurity experts have said is that data from government and private websites hacked over the past 1 year is available on Darknet, and this is important in terms of the kind of issues that we have seen in our political scenario, especially with regards to audio leaks as well, and something which forms part of the political debate in our country and the kind of repercussions that has, and also then in the larger sense the kind of cybersecurity issues that we have and how well prepared we need to be for future threats and for the security of the country. So that's going to be our second segment of the show today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by Senior Analyst Farooq Batafi and Senior Analyst Mr. Raja Faisal, and we've been joined online by Dr. Kesar Bengali, who's an economist, and will soon also be joined by Dr. Abid Qayyum Saleri, Executive Director, SDPI. Dr. Kesar, let me start with you. When we take a look at the current change, of course, there is a lot that is going on within the economic situation of the country, especially since the start of this year. We have seen that the economic instability in Pakistan unfortunately has existed and increased in so many ways in this year. And then we have, of course, the flood situation within Pakistan, the food security crisis, the Ukrainian conflict, rising inflation globally, and so much more that, of course, has contributed to where we stand today. There are numerous challenges ahead, and at this point, when we see a change in the finance ministry's portfolio, what sort of challenges do you think exist for the new finance minister, and how do you see this change bringing in any sort of development for the country? Dr. Kesa, are you with us? Dr. Kesa, can you hear me? Unfortunately, I don't think Dr. Kesa is able to hear me. Dr. Kesa Bengali, are you with us?
We can see him, but perhaps the audio is
Dr. Kesa Bengali, if you could please unmute yourself, but I don't know if you can hear me. We can see you, and hopefully would like to hear you as well. Are you with us, Dr. Kesa? Unfortunately, I don't think I can reach him at the moment, but we'll try and connect with him once again. But Farooq, when we take a look at, of course, the current economic situation of Pakistan, there is, of course, a lot that the current government has had to bear, and very tough decisions that have been taken by the government, especially with regards to the IMF bailout program. This was, of course, an important aspect for Pakistan and something that we all welcomed. And now with the floods and, of course, the devastating situation that the country currently is in, we have seen that this has been one of the most important things that we have highlighted across the UN General Assembly and on the bilateral meetings as well. And now with the IMF giving us some relaxation, at least with the program, how do you see this particular development in terms of the particular program and the kind of relaxations that we have had, and whether or not it's going to be able to cater to the kind of loss and damage that we have incurred?
Right, Sana, I think that at this moment one has to actually first of all look at the state of affairs. We had made commitments, we are part of the program, and because of that one has to actually look at the conditionalities that were there. One conditionality was regarding front loading of the tranche. I mean, you have to actually ensure that rest of the pieces are actually in place. The second thing was tax and energy, tax on energy, particularly petroleum products and electricity, that had to go up. This was also a very important thing. And then, of course, fiscal and current account deficit targets. Because of the budget, we actually made very ambitious targets, right? And at this moment, it seemed that with all that is going on, with 1/3 of the country underwater, if we keep on increasing the cost of electricity and petroleum products, then we also have to arrange money to get the tranches beforehand. And finally, we have to actually ensure that current account and fiscal deficits actually remain under control. That would be very difficult, right? So that's why there is this relaxation. It actually enables us to continue or remain connected to the international financial institutions, especially under the purview of IMF system. But apart from that, we don't see that $1.1 billion tranche is going to do much. Perhaps there is going to be increase in that amount as well. We will see the results in coming days, and let's hope that we see more aid and more support coming from the developed world.
Absolutely. Dr. Kesa Bengali, are you with us? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Sana. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Dr. Kesa, earlier I was asking you with regards to, of course, the change in the finance ministry. It's an important development, and considering the economic situation and the kind of issues that we were just talking about, especially with regards to the IMF program, the flood situation, the global food security and rising prices. This, of course, is something that Pakistan has been facing since the start of this year, and perhaps before that as well. So the kind of economic instability that we've had and the kind of challenges that currently exist with the flood situation, how do you see this particular change in the finance ministry, and what do you think needs to be done or looked at in terms of the current challenges that exist for this portfolio?
I think I have to say two things here. One is that Mifta Ismail had a one-point agenda. He was given a one-point terms of reference, and that was to avoid a default at this point of time. And he has done that. He needs to be commended for that. The other is that it really doesn't matter who the finance minister is, because in the current situation, any finance minister has a one-point agenda again, and that is to implement IMF policies, IMF conditionalities. There are no other economic agenda on the horizon. Nothing for development, nothing for the people, nothing for welfare. So it really doesn't matter who's the finance minister.
All right.
Dr. Kassar, if we talk about, obviously Pakistan is facing situations in which of course we have floods and relief is going on, but that flood has actually damaged the crops as well, the future crops. If we look at import and export forecast for next year, should we keep that in our mind as well for planning to go ahead and to take the economy ahead, sir? And if so, then what is the challenge which is going to be very important for next year?
You know, I've said this more than once on your program. There are only two challenges that this economy faces: the budget deficit and the trade deficit. Whoever is the finance minister, whichever government is in power, they have to reduce these deficits. And in the short run, the only way to reduce these deficits is to reduce imports and to reduce government non-development expenditure.
Right. Doctor, yes, carry on,
Yeah,
please.
we can talk about a lot of issues, is that they are all peripheral to these two basic deficits.
Right, sure. But Dr. Kassar, of course, there is a lot of discussion and a lot of expectation perhaps from the new finance minister as well, and whatever influence that he may have over the decision making, or what sort of actions or policy changes he may bring in, or how he's going to navigate with the IMF as well, and whether or not there's going to be any impact on the exchange rate policy as well, because this is of course something that has earlier been carried out by him in the past. We of course understand currently it's the sole responsibility of the State Bank, but do you anticipate any major changes in the current financial decisions as we see?
On the margin, yes, but fundamentally, I don't expect any, although I hope there will be some. And as far as managing the currency is concerned, we must know that ISHAQ was finance minister in the not very recent past, and he did two things. He concentrated solely on raising revenues, and he managed to keep the exchange rate stable. Now, keeping the managed exchange rate stable means the government buys dollars on the market, sells dollars on the market, buys rupees. You can only sell if you have the dollars. But even then, the government was selling dollars that were obtained on loan. And even now, if the finance ministry sells dollars to keep the exchange rate stable, it will be dollars which we have taken on loan. It is not our own dollars. And both these measures, the excessive stance on revenue generation, which has killed industry and killed export, and on artificially keeping the dollar rate low, will be severely damaging to the economy.
Right, absolutely. Dr. Kassar, you also mentioned the fact that you hope to see at least some changes happening. What would you think those changes may be, or what actions do you hope to see?
And Dr. Saab, even in this program repeatedly you have voiced these concerns, particularly about non-developmental budget, and particularly, especially even in the defense sector, where it is non-combat related. And this is a point well made, repeatedly made on this show elsewhere as well. Why do you think it is not happening?
I think this is a political decision. This is not a decision which will be affected by who holds the Prime Minister's office or who holds the Finance Minister's office.
Right.
This is a political decision which all the stakeholders of the state will have to make, because there are sacrifices involved. We always get sacrifices from the people. We have turned several middle-class families pushed them into below the poverty line. But look at the pattern of expenditure. Even now, they continue to support the lifestyle of the ruling elite in Rawalpindi, Islamabad. And if that doesn't change, I see no hope for the economy. It really doesn't matter who's holding which position.
Right, and Dr. Kassar, you've of course said that quite a few times. And Farooq, when we take a look at that statement, of course, Dr. Kassar is of the view that it doesn't amount to much who is holding the finance ministry's portfolio. Do you agree with that?
Not at all. I think every policymaker, I have great respect for Dr. Bengali, But a fact is that every finance minister brings their own approach to policy making and how things are handled. For example, when Dar Saab was previously in government and when he was actually finance minister at that time, there was this matter of exchange rate control, and that was controlled as was pointed out by Dr. Kasab Bengali as well, that it was stable, but at the same time there was this concern that Pakistan had to actually throw dollar in the market to control it, right? And that continued for quite some time. Then Mifta Ismail came during the previous government and he reversed that pattern. And all of a sudden we saw that the dollar was attached to the market forces, and then of course there's a lot of speculation. These things are there and they are going to actually have an impact in coming days as well. We still have to see what Dar Saab brings to the table. We keep on hearing from markets or people who are actually focusing on exchange rate that they have already seen some kind of stability in rupee and decline in dollar's value. Remember, it matters also at what point in time you are actually becoming the finance minister. Last time when he was there, dollar was quite stable, right, internationally. But now we have seen its appreciation. We keep on hearing people talking about pound losing its luster against dollar, and we keep on hearing yen actually declining as well. But what we don't appreciate is that dollar is getting stronger as well, and it might have something to do with the economic situation, especially post-Trump situation. That's why it is there. And then of course the country is in far deeper crisis than it was last time Dar Saab was finance minister. So I don't know what exactly he brings to the table, but to say that it doesn't matter, I don't think that that would be the case. Otherwise, the previous finance minister would have continued. There was this impression, there are two aspects to it, right? One, that he was not a senator, and that's why he had to lose his portfolio by the start of next month. And the second thing was that his policies were unpopular, and because of that, it was impacting PMLN and the ruling alliance's approval on the street. So now we have to see that with all these conditionalities of IMF, what Dar Saab can actually, what kind of miracle he can pull. But right now, it must be a tough call.
Right. So, but isn't the restriction of making unpopular decisions also applicable to the new finance minister?
Right. Then why change the previous one?
Exactly. That's my question.
No, that is my point as well. Of course, the ruling party, the ruling coalition thinks that that Dar Saab actually has a better understanding of the markets and how they actually move forward. And then, of course, there is this matter of speculators. We don't know why suddenly, as soon as we heard that he is returning to the country, the dollar market suddenly actually started behaving. Could it be that speculators suddenly realize that there are going to be severe consequences for them? Could it be regarding smuggling of dollars going into Afghanistan elsewhere? Or it could be something else as well. So we still have to wait and see what exactly is on the table. He hasn't become a finance minister yet. He just became a senator now. And we can go on about that as well, but the fact is that the moment he takes over, then we'll know what exactly his policies are. I don't make policy, I just interpreted them.
Absolutely.
Right?
Dr. Kesa, let me just get one question out of Dr. Kesa. Dr. Kesa, when we take a look at market speculations at the moment, how do you see this particular effect that it has had, of course, these changes that have had on market speculation, and how temporary or long-lasting do you think it's going to be?
Move on sentiment, they move on information, they even move on rumors. So I think the day-to-day fluctuation of the market is not something I would take very seriously. Okay. I'm looking more at something like 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, how the economy behaves. If today's measure will bring down the price of dollar, that will be popular. But let me say that I am not very excited about ISHAQ Dar because of his past record. He is responsible for keeping the dollar stable and compromising export and promoting import. And he is responsible for setting up, I mean, his government at that time was responsible for setting up two power plants with imported coal. We were screaming for the last 20 years not to use imported fuel for power generation. Now the government has admitted that that was wrong and it shouldn't have been done. But it was under ISHAQ Dar's stewardship that it was done. So I hope that ISHAQ Dar has learned from his own mistakes.
Right, and
And
also, does he even have the liberty to take such actions at this moment, considering the economic situation? Do we even have that as an option?
well, that's why I say the who holds the post doesn't matter. It is the entire government which has to operate, and the government has to operate and keep the other stakeholders of the state along with them. Unless and until there is a consensus among all the stakeholders of the state that the economy needs to be mended, and it can only be done by controlling these two deficits. Everything else is just window dressing.
Yeah,
Right,
Dr.
absolutely.
Bengali, Dr. Bengali, if we talk about what do we have right now on the table for, of course, Minister Dar when he takes the office, one of them things is that, of course, if we take the statement of Secretary Blinken, that he has suggested Pakistan that Pakistan should obviously talk to China for getting concessions on the loan concessions. One. Number two, Pakistan, of course, will be getting, for the relief purposes, Pakistan would be attracting aid, and that aid would be in billions of dollars. How do you figure out, when all of the aid is coming to Pakistan, and if we are able to get the concessions in our loans, would it be creating an impact on the economy of Pakistan? And if so, then where do you see Pakistan's economy in 6 months' time or in a year's time, sir?
I'm very distressed by the language of the discussion that is going on in the country, and even now. The whole discussion is on how much aid we will get, how we will get it, where we will get it from, and under what conditions we will get it from. As if this country is now surviving only to obtain aid. This is very, very distressing for me. It is insulting for me and for the country. There are discussion of economic policy has actually come down to how much aid, how and from where we will get our aid. Now imagine Secretary Blinken's statement. He said, we are always Pakistan's friend and we want to continue to be Pakistan's friend, and here's $10 million. As if their friendship has to be underwritten by giving us a small check. This is very humiliating. And
Right.
I don't think I would like to be part of this discussion on how do we get our beggar's bowl, how do we turn our beggar's bowl around the world.
Right. Sir, I totally respect your sentiment. I understand it as well. I'm part of the same country that you belong to. But my concern at this moment is the kind of challenge that we have seen. I mean, 90% of agricultural produce destroyed. 5,000 or 6,000 miles of roads actually swept away. 1/3 of the country underwater. I understand that we can keep our ego, we can keep our honor, or actually do something for the 33 million people who are distressed at this moment. Is it not a bigger concern that keeping my honor right now?
Absolutely, and we have made sure of the fact that we talk about justice when it comes to climate change. Why must every financial transaction be looked at in terms of begging? Is it that way?
See, we are begging. That's all we are doing. We are not, if we are not begging, we are selling our silver, family silver, one of the two things. Now, I agree with you that this is a crisis time. We've lost severely in terms of our assets during the floods. But let me say this, for every dollar that we ask the world, let's put in a dollar of our own. Let's divert a dollar from our own expenditures and put it in. The important thing today is if, it's not only the country's stock of rice and wheat and other, individuals had stored wheat in their homes for the rest of the months till
That's
the
true.
new harvest. That has been washed away. So wheat will have to be imported and supplied at affordable prices. So the whatever dollar we have, either from aid or from our meager exports, should first be used to provide food, essential food items, and sold so that it is available in the market at affordable prices. Food security is important. So
Absolutely. Professor, when
policy
we take a
priorities,
look, yes, yes, Dr. Gesser, carry on, please.
yeah, the policy priorities have to change.
Yeah.
We cannot keep importing dog food and cat food and Havana cigars and Swiss chocolate and Swiss cheese while people don't have enough wheat to eat.
Right, and Dr.
Dr.
Kesar,
Bengali,
I may
yeah.
agree with the Swiss chocolate. I'm ready to leave that out, but I'm going to differ on the cat food and pet food since I am a pet mom. And so
Sana,
is for
if
our
I can,
pet dad. Yes.
if I can ask a question from
Go ahead,
Dr.
go
Bengali, he has mentioned that policy and priorities must be changed. Obviously, looking at the current situation right now, there is another suggestion by obviously Secretary Blinken that he wants Pakistan to initiate a dialogue with India right now. And if we see India, of course, India is a huge market, and of course, Pakistan can import from India in terms of food products and in terms of other products as well. Looking at the current situation, the crisis Pakistan is going through, should we be expecting that a policy of sitting with India and talking about peace, number one, and number two, could we say that we must continue or initiate some sort of trade agreements between us, sir?
I think this is something that many of us have been asking for many years, decades, I would say. But the situation today is that it is not just up to Pakistan to initiate good relations. I think given the weakness of Pakistan, India will try to tighten the screws on us. They will not play ball according to how we want them to play ball. So let us not assume that once we decide to open trade with India and have relations with India, India will immediately reciprocate in the same way. It is not as simple as that. We resolution of conflict with India is not just getting Indian products while we are dealing with the floods. I think there is a totality of relationship that has to be agreed to, and the Indians are not going to oblige us just out of goodness of spirit. So I think it's a very complicated situation. We should not discuss this issue of trade or relations with India in very simple single line terms. This is a
Right.
complex issue. We know that during the Gujarat Mahatma Benazir Bhutto negotiations, an agreement was reached on Saichen, but the Indian army did not allow that agreement to be implemented. So it
Right.
is the sort of the ball is in two courts. Who plays which angle is important.
Right, absolutely. Faisal, earlier I wanted to ask you with regards to what Dr. Kesar also mentioned, which is, of course, the kind of consensus or fundamental change that we require in terms of the economic policies and measures. And this is something that, of course, is much talked about. The Prime Minister, when he came into power, also spoke about this as the first thing that needs to be done in terms of a charter of economy. He made many efforts towards that goal as well. And then, of course, we see that the government is making tough decisions to help improve the economy and bring it on the right track. But this seems to be still a difficult task and a challenge. And with the kind of instability that we see with regards to the floods, we, of course, have years to deal with. How do you think that we're going to be able to evolve from this economic crisis without this sort of consensus? And if not, if this is not a possibility at all, then what sort of efforts need to be made toward that goal?
Sana, you very, it's a very good question. And right now, of course, if we look at the current situation of the country, of course, Farooq has rightly pointed out, that 90% of our crops, obviously they are washed out, and I mean, we don't know how things are shaping up next year. Of course, wheat would be a problem for us, for Pakistan.
Not immediately, but it will be later on.
It will affect, obviously, and with the Ukrainian crisis, of course, we know that traditionally we used to get wheat from Ukraine whenever we needed.
Absolutely, and people are homeless.
Exactly.
And winters are coming.
Winters are coming, and in all of these situations, and of course our economy is in dire condition right now. I believe the consensus is the key, and this is not only the government's responsibility to cope with the current situation. I think all of the political parties, obviously one side is the government, and majority of the political parties are part of the government. But if we talk about the opposition party, the major party PTI, I think they need to sit with the government and talk over it, and the consensus should be brought in terms of how to deal with the challenges we are facing right now.
May I very quickly
Yes,
chip in,
please.
Sana? The fact is that when you look at what political parties are doing, I think all political parties individually are doing their bit, right? We have seen Imran Khan actually raising money and then deploying the distribution mechanism through Sania Nishta. And that is, I mean, I thought it was a really good idea. But I wish that instead of having these silos where they all separately work, and that's why so many things actually fall through the cracks, they all could come together, because then you can actually share experience, your wisdom, your knowledge, and the end result is that we are talking about the people of Pakistan,
Exactly.
who are everyone's constituency and who are everyone's concern at this moment. These the kind of diseases that I'm sure, Sana, you traveled, you must have seen. You must have also seen Raja Faisal, and I've also known about what kind of diseases are spreading right now. We cannot afford to waste time. We all need to get together.
Absolutely. But Dr. Kessa, this is of course something that we have been talking about since very long. There have been decades of this discussion, and we see that currently the kind of economic crisis that Pakistan has seen, there is not much time that we can afford for this particular consensus to occur as well. What sort of measures need to be taken now? Because we seem to be in this vicious cycle with the IMF bailout package as well, and we keep returning to the same spot irrespective of whosoever is in power. What sort of fundamental change is required for that? And if we cannot proceed with consensus, what other options are we left with?
I think there was, it was said a few minutes earlier that we need a consensus among all political parties. I think there is a consensus among all political parties. The consensus is required among all the stakeholders of the state. Because no political party can reduce a rupee out of defense budget. So I think the consensus is on the other, it's not just among political parties. Political parties, there is consensus. I think any political party in power would like to have more resources to work with. And those resources only come out of reduction of this non-development expenditure. We need development expenditure. We need to rebuild roads, bridges, irrigation channels. I was in government in 2010-11 in Sindh government, and I was directly involved in many of the relief and rehabilitation measures post 2010. I know how much damage floods cause. Once the water recedes, you begin to wonder where the road was or where the this water course was. All been washed away. So money will be required, and we can't expect the international community to come and do these things from us. It will only have to come out of our own resources.
Right, absolutely, Dr. Kessler, and that's important. But of course, with the kind of catastrophe that we've seen, there is a lot in terms of accountability and responsibility towards the developed world and the contributors to global carbon emissions. Surely that sort of impact that the global change that is required in terms of the impact of climate change exists, and perhaps that can be factored in discussions around climate change discourse, especially when we talk about loss and damage with regards to global financing.
And by the way, Sana, once you have gotten this answer,
we can
I want to
always
actually talk about local issue as well.
Sure.
So, but
yes,
go ahead,
Dr.
sir.
Guess.
We can scream at the top of our voice about the responsibility of the international community, the fact that we were not responsible for climate change and they were, but the world operates based on who has more leverage. Pakistan has no leverage in the world today. No matter what we say, there will be no response. So let us try and rely on our own resources.
Right. Absolutely, sir. But let me bring you back to the local situation, and one comment that you made, that there is political consensus among political parties, but there has to be among institutions. Nobody will say that there needs to be consensus between all the institutions of the country, all the federating units, and their executive and various parts as well. My concern is that at this moment it seems that all political parties might be doing their own thing, sir. They could have actually synergized, sat together, and actually hammered out a solution. The more the merrier, more people actually are experts come to the table, they can actually bring further solutions. And on the other side, we have this perpetual, sword of Damocles actually hanging on the head, that Imran Khan Sahab can actually anytime start his long march on Islamabad. So that becomes a concern as well. In the middle of a crisis, is it not important for the political parties to also find a common ground? Because in the end, the most important thing is the people of Pakistan, a significant part of whom are totally devastated at this moment.
Yes, I think no one can disagree with that. That's perfect. I agree with you. But let us also take reality. There is absolutely no hope of Imran Khan playing ball. He has an agenda of his own, and it doesn't matter if people are still waist deep in water in Sindh and Balochistan. His quest to get his political objectives goes on. He will not sit with anybody. He will not cooperate with anybody, and that's a fact. And we have to live with that fact. So I think let's not hope that we will get any shred of cooperation from Imran Khan on any issue. The government and the state has to move on without him.
Okay.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Gesa Bengali, for joining us and being a part of the debate and talking to us at length regarding the economic situation and, of course, the change in the finance ministry and what lies ahead for Pakistan in terms of both political and economic stability. We're now going to be moving on to our second segment, which is going to be about another important aspect of security within Pakistan. That is, of course, cybersecurity. And there's a lot that goes on the dark side of the internet, which, of course, needs our attention. There have been reports coming in and the cyber experts talking about how there is data from government and private websites available on the Darknet, and that is something that we need to be, of course, concerned about with regards to the kind of leakage that we've seen in the past, not just in political scenarios, but otherwise as well, and then the kind of issues that it puts forward in terms of our larger social security. Faisal, when we take a look at this particular issue, there seems to be large gaps and loopholes in the way that perhaps our cybersecurity analysts or experts have been able to tackle the kind of issues that exist on the internet. There seems to be a large part of the internet that it hasn't really been explored to a large extent by perhaps global partners and leaders as well. So when we take a look at this particular issue and the kind of strategies that we have in place or the kind of plan that we have in terms of our cybersecurity, do you see that there's a huge gap between the two? And if there is, what sort of action do you think is required in terms of us reanalyzing what needs to be done and how we're going to be able to involve that into our national security decisions as well?
Sana, when we talk about cybersecurity, I would consider Pakistan to be on the beginner's level, because the world has worked on it, and the world cybersecurity in today's time, they are taking it as serious as controlling your borders and to put your forces on your borders.
The terrorist networks have existed on the dark net.
Exactly, and in today's times, Sana, it is so important. I would recommend that this is more important than having the armed forces safeguarding your borders, the natural borders. But if we talk about the cyber walls obviously, I mean, firewalls, they are being created. I'll give the example of the Western world. Why I know this, and because one of my cousin, he's actually a cybersecurity expert in one of the Western countries, and he is part of the government out there, and he is actually, being there. He's making sure that that country's cyber walls, they are in place, and the firewall is safeguarding the country. But when we talk about Pakistan, Pakistan is at beginners level. We need to put efforts into it, and in today's times, of course, if we talk about the dark web, dark web is sort of underworld where all of the criminal activities are going on. You take the example of child pornography, you take the example of all of these hackings of the government institutions, and all of the paperwork from there, they get
Even
the data.
drug supply and marijuana.
Drug supplying and the money laundering, and each and everything is taking place out there. And to me, I think this the idea of bitcoins, it has actually given them a sort of leverage to trade in the bitcoins, and it is taking place throughout the world. And that is why, even in this case, Lucy obviously talked about that, I will be taking 180 bitcoins for it. So it is a clear indication that our data is being hacked, it is being sold, and
Right, but
this is alarming for Pakistan.
Absolutely.
And I think we need to put efforts into it.
Sure, but Farooq, it seems that this is some sort of universal knowledge that we understand that this is something that's going on and this is what exists. But in terms of how we're dealing with it, it seems that we're still way off. And not just in terms of how Pakistan is dealing with, but how we have seen global action being taken against the Darknet. Is it really not something that we completely understand still?
Right, Sana, I think that a lot needs to be said. And before I actually talk about why does the Darknet actually exist, I think that there is a very interesting story about its genesis. And the developed world's intelligence organizations actually first started them, because then they had to actually handle or tackle some certain darker, money, or for that matter, they had to actually interact with certain, contraband items or groups. So that was how it actually all began. But I'm going to talk about what was said earlier first, with your permission.
Sure.
Let me first of all disabuse you of this impression that there is any wall at all. In this age, there is no walls, and no matter how smart you become or how much invested you are in technological advancement, there will always be a group of hackers who will be far more advanced. And then don't discount the nation state actors. I'm going to give you an example of both. For example, in the US, in 2020 only, right, 2 years ago, there was a very big breach, data breach. It was called SolarWinds, breach, data breach. And then what was interesting, they never could even understand how long those straws have been dipping into their storage, right? So they could not. The US, I mean, I'm talking about the world's foremost power at this moment. They couldn't do it. And then, of course, we have seen what happened with WikiLeaks, Snowden, and all those examples are before our eyes. So due diligence is important. Hacking a website is fairly easy job because it has exposure on the internet, and till the time it is there, you are going to very easily hack it. Now, regarding the firewalls and what we could have done, where we are at, I think we have all the basic knowledge and tools, but again, our priorities are absolutely wrong. Our priorities are wrong because we keep on actually focusing on moral policing and censoring, right? Whenever there is some kind of dispute or some problem, all of a sudden some genius decides that we are going to actually block YouTube, or we are going to try to block Twitter. Instead of that, all these institutions which are there should be focused on making our lives easier by ensuring our protection, right? That doesn't happen. Recently, there was furor regarding VPN registration. I mean, this is thought to be the only method left for anybody who wants to, especially a specialist who wants to access something and they cannot, and they use VPN.
Yeah.
Now the state of Pakistan has asked people to register their VPNs as well.
Wow.
But leaving it aside, now talk about the state actors and how they actually operate. One example I will give you of 2014, when there was this, sit-in going on in Islamabad. Indian hackers started attacking and disfiguring our websites, and what they would leave behind would be a slogan like Mera Bharat Mahan, or My India is great, right? So Pakistani hackers would respond to them and hack their websites, and what would they leave behind there? Go Nawaz, go. Right, I kid you not. This is what was happening.
Wow.
So wrong priorities again,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes.
And then there is a recent scandal that has been big in India. And if you remember, we have spoken about it. It is called Pegasus Software, right? NSO Group is an Israeli company that makes the software that can download into your phone without any problem. Earlier, it used to be through a hyperlink. If you clicked it by a phishing scam, you didn't do it. Then they started actually shipping it through the SMSs.
Right.
And now they have new system that they don't even need to do that. All they have to do is they have to ring your number once, and if you take the call, or even if you don't, it actually comes to your phone. And once it is in your phone, it actually takes control of your mic, your cameras, and your data, and all the operations on the phone. They can activate it remotely. They can extract all the data they want. They can turn your phones into their own
It's
recording
insane, it's scary.
devices.
Yes.
I know you have
Very
to
quickly.
conclude,
I do.
but very quickly, let me say that there exists a very simple solution regarding Pegasus program. I ask all the leaders who are actually important and who carry a mobile, either to avoid using phone or keeping it the phone in the room while they make decisions. But if they do, please do one thing for us. Every day, make it a habit that restart your phone,
Exactly.
because then most of these softwares actually are flushed out of the system.
All right, thank you.
Very quickly, we have brains who are working on, youngsters, they are working on,
Excuse me,
anti-hacking
only
and
youngsters?
hacking.
Excuse
and
me,
there
only
are
youngsters?
favors for everybody.
There are
I just
hackers,
agree.
there are anti-hackers, all of them, but government needs to channelize them.
All right.
And
But-
by the way, I'm sorry, only youngsters are
And
there.
Faisal, there
I
are some
just
who
gave you an
don't,
example of a brain sitting here, and you have to actually go out and say something.
Farooq, we are
that's
all down.
That's all that we have from the
I'm a
debate.
coder,
Thank
by
you
the way.
very much.
Thank
It's lovely to have Farooq and Faisal back so that we have some element of debate back in the show. We'll see you tomorrow.